Hello, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. The soldiers of the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after Anna of Kiev, turned the Pokrovsk direction into a real bloodbath for the occupiers. In a minute, we'll show you this footage, and also the GUR operation in Pokrovsk. A ground corridor was opened up to our special forces, and additional troops have joined them. Our journalists know all the details of what's happening.
The decisive battle for Pokrovsk continues. Russian troops are advancing within the city, but Ukrainian forces are holding the defense and launching counterattacks, slowing down the enemy's actions. The defense forces continue clearing Pokrovsk of occupiers now in the northern part of the city. This became possible because over the past few days it was possible to reinforce with personnel and equipment. After a successful airborne operation, additional special forces units joined the GUR commandos, who had secured certain positions and opened a ground corridor. According to the president of Ukraine, special operations of various kinds are taking place in Pokrovsk, but most of them should not be discussed. Russian troops are trying to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses, attacking in several directions at once. They have concentrated the largest number of soldiers and officers here.
According to various estimates by the Ukrainian command, around 100,000 Russian servicemen are directly or indirectly involved in this entire operation around Pokrovsk. These are approximate figures, just to give you an idea of the scale of forces involved. In fact, I'll go even further. There have been instances from the direction of Sumy region and from the direction of Kostiantynivka. Forces have been redeployed from these directions toward Pokrovsk to reinforce because they are short on manpower.
We're talking about so-called kamikazes, that is, contract soldiers with an average life expectancy of 12 days. So accordingly, these are special units of the Russian army, plus of course Marine brigades. In particular, the 155th Marine Brigade has been redeployed to the Pokrovsk direction with a specific mission.
According to the Institute for the Study of War, the occupiers have advanced in the southern part of Myrnohrad and in eastern Rudinske, gradually approaching the city of Pokrovsk itself.
At this point, there is no reason to say that Russian occupation forces have established a foothold directly in Myrnohrad. At present, the presence of Russian occupiers has been verified at the territory of the Mine Administration 5.2.6 near Rudinske. It should be noted that the situation is changing dynamically. In other words, the occupiers are trying to intensify their offensive in order to take direct control of locations held by the Ukrainian defense forces. The Ukrainian defense forces are conducting counterattacks to prevent further advances by the Russian occupiers.
The enemy is trying to capture Pokrovsk and the nearby settlements surrounding them and is increasing the number of air attacks. In particular, they are using glide bombs and drones.
There is no classic encirclement as it is usually described in textbooks around the city of Pokrovsk. In other words, there is no solid ring. It is not closed. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the part that is still open is about 5 kilometers wide. But it's an extremely critical distance, and it no longer matters because Russian drones are already there, Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups are already present, shells are flying in, and over the past week, the situation for the movement of Ukrainian troops has become as bad as possible.
According to the General Staff, over the past 24 hours, Ukrainian defenders have stopped 55 assault actions by the aggressor.
During these combined attacks, up to a tank battalion is used. Of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, that's more than 30 units of heavy armored vehicles. Moreover, they are using a no price is too high tactic. The occupiers are well aware of the superiority of Ukraine's defense forces in the use of FPV drones, and only about 20% of the heavy armored vehicles and accordingly personnel actually reach the positions of Ukraine's defense forces.
Despite the enemy's active operations, the AFU continue to hold their positions and destroy enemy forces.
Over the past week, the defense forces of Ukraine have successfully counterattacked and managed to liberate 4 settlements, Kucheryavi Yar, Sukhetske, Zatishok, and Shakhov. At the moment, the occupiers are trying to intensify their offensive along the flanks of the Ukrainian grouping, specifically in the area of Vladimirovka, with the threat of advancing toward Prishain. These are combined attacks involving armored vehicles. And in the area of Rodinske.
On the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk operation, in the area of Dobropilya, Ukrainian forces have liberated part of the territory that Russian troops had previously advanced into. According to analysts, the Donetsk region remains the main direction of Russia's offensive this winter, with the goal of achieving significant results by spring 2025.
And here is another extremely important topic. The fate of the head of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, is hanging by a thread. Putin will dismiss him if the occupiers do not capture Pokrovsk by mid-November. And by the way, a candidate to succeed Gerasimov has already been chosen. Who is this so-called lucky one? The answer is in our report.
The last leg of Valery Gerasimov's chair has broken. According to reports from the Kremlin is very dissatisfied with the general's work and, to put it mildly, his less than truthful reports from the front, according to the Atesh movement, citing information from officers of one of the Russian military groups.
Putin gave Gerasimov a deadline to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November. This order is the general's last chance to keep his position. Against the backdrop of this ultimatum, there has been a sharp increase in meat grinder tactics on the Pokrovsk front. The command is sending huge waves of personnel into suicidal attacks in order to fulfill the order at any cost.
Unremarkable and lacking charisma, Valery Gerasimov is the man to whom Putin owes his first presidential term. It was he who, while Moscow was preparing to check boxes on ballots, led the combat operations for the village of Komsomolskoye. This 15-day battle became the key and final one in Russia's second Chechen campaign. Gerasimov delivered victory to candidate Putin, stepping over bathtubs of blood, over the countless corpses of Russian soldiers and local residents.
The residents were allowed to leave the village, but they weren't allowed to go far. They were forced to stay for several days on the outskirts of the village, but in reality, they served as a human shield. In
2012, it was Gerasimov who presented the country's leadership with the formula for hybrid warfare. At that time, he insisted that it was necessary to move away from classical wars.
This ongoing situation is moving towards destabilization on the ground, meaning that the environment in the area is becoming less stable and more uncertain.
A little later, the Gerasimov formula was tested by the Russians first in Crimea and then in Donbas. According to Bellingcat investigators, it was Valery Gerasimov who, in 2014, initiated the deployment of regular Russian troops near Ukrainian Ilovaisk and the transfer of Russian military equipment to the separatists, from which, by the way, the Malaysian Boeing was shot down, the silent Gerasimov, as he is called among themselves. The Grey Cardinal of the General Staff has outlasted all his flamboyant and loud
Critics are individuals who analyze, evaluate, and provide their opinions on various forms of art, literature, music, movies, or other creative works. Their reviews and assessments help audiences understand the strengths and weaknesses of these works, guiding public perception and influencing cultural conversations. Ammo stockpile is currently at 70% as of now. Shoigu, Gerasimov, where the hell are the munitions?
Prigozhin has been blown up, Strelkov Gherkin is rotting behind bars. After the scandal, it was thanks to Valery Gerasimov's efforts that the favorite of Russian Z patriots, General Popov, was sent there. Even Shoigu was removed from the Ministry of Defense, but the silent Gerasimov still remains in his seat. Although rumors of his dismissal have been spreading actively since last summer. And now, supposedly, there are actually grounds for them. If Gerasimov fails to capture Pokrovsk by mid-November, he will be replaced by a certain Viktor Viktorovich Paznikir, who was born and raised not far from the Ukrainian city of Sumy. Not much is known about him. He was awarded the Order of Zhukov by a classified decree, and in February 2024 he received the rank of Colonel General.
It's hard to call this military commander a media figure. His name was first mentioned in the media after the start of the operation in Syria. The Lieutenant General held the position of First Deputy Chief of the main operational directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. His briefings were dedicated to the situation around Palmyra and Aleppo. Paznikir also spoke about the work of the Russian military police in the Middle East and criticized the presence of American naval forces in the region. The Lieutenant General's statement about the US plans to develop a global missile defense system caused a major stir. At the Moscow Conference on International Security, Paznikir called Washington a likely adversary of Moscow. To overcome missile defense, Viktor Viktorovich proposed using the Sarmat and Avangard systems.
It is still unknown whether Gerasimov will be able to outsmart his adversaries again and hold on. Since the summer, the occupiers have been amassing troops in the Pokrovske direction and probing for weak spots in the Ukrainian defense. On their side are Russia's vast resources, which they spare no expense to achieve their goals, and a huge number of fortune seekers lured by contracts and the new status of hero. And in 2025, Pokrovsk could become an important and decisive battle, much like the Chechen village of Komsomolskoye once was.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
And now let's analyze the operational situation on the Alexandrovsk front, where the enemy is also becoming more aggressive. On the Alexandrovsk front, the enemy carried out 29 attacks yesterday in the areas of the settlements of Zeleny Gai, Yanvarskaya, Novosilovka, Voronoe, Sosnovka, Verbovoe, Alexevka, Rybnaya, Yegorovka, and Krasnogorskaya. Meanwhile, Putin's worst nightmare is coming true. Finland will conduct large-scale military exercises involving about 5,000 people. 15,000 military personnel will take part, with the exercises running from November to December in regions including those bordering directly with the Russian Federation. And in the swamps, there's real panic about this. In particular, the authorities in Karelia are forming people's militias to assist border guards on the border with Finland. All the details are in our next report. It is in effect.
Finland is taking preemptive action by deploying 15,000 troops to the border with Russia. The Finns are preparing for the largest series of military exercises of the year. Conscripts, reservists, career military personnel, as well as units from allied countries Sweden and the United Kingdom will take part in them. According to the country's ground forces, the purpose of the maneuvers is to test the army's readiness to defend the state and to strengthen cooperation with NATO allies.
On the territory of the occupying country, directly near the borders of Finland, there is currently intensive engineering construction of new military bases by the occupying country's army. This refers to Petrozavodsk, Kandalaksha and other settlements on the territory of the Russian Federation, which indicate the redeployment of Russian army units directly near the borders of Finland.
One of the largest episodes will be the Livalais Sentry exercise, which will take place in southern Finland from November 27th to December 4th. About 7,000 participants will be involved in it.
The Russian Federation has constantly made it clear to Finland what threat hangs over this country. Moreover, there has been a constant element of military political pressure on Finland with the aim, accordingly, of maintaining its so-called neutral status. There is not the slightest reason to say that after the occupation of Finnish lands, friendly and good neighborly relations were established. The Russian military presence near Finland's borders was constantly increasing.
In the spring of 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This provoked a sharp reaction from Russia, worsening bilateral relations. In addition, Finland imposed sanctions against Russia and refused to grant asylum to Russians fleeing mobilization. After that, Putin's lackeys accused the Finns of every sin at every opportunity. For example, in September, former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev decided that Finland was preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a springboard for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to his version, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II, claiming that they once paid too little thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
This is precisely an element of diplomatic and military pressure on Finland. Moreover, similar statements are being made not only regarding Finland, but also regarding Sweden, specifically about the island of Gotland, and accordingly regarding Poland.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. He stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything they need. Medvedev had previously spoken about this as well.
We simply cannot overlook the important fact that Finland is, at this moment, currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This also determines changes in our military approaches to securing the border and responding to possible unfriendly acts.
The political and military leaders of Finland are doing everything they can to emphasize that an attack by Russia would be an act of suicidal madness. Nevertheless, the authorities in Karelia are strengthening the border with Finland with the help of volunteer patrols.
The Russian Federation is demonstrating its readiness for a direct confrontation with the NATO bloc, and accordingly the first states that will be in the focus of the occupying country's army are respectively Finland and the Baltic states. Therefore, the risks are quite high. This is also evidenced by the formation of new military units in the Leningrad military district, and accordingly the deployment of military infrastructure directly near the borders with Finland.
Earlier, it became known that Finland had offered NATO to establish a new military base on its territory. Helsinki could become a base for large NATO reconnaissance drones.